you're doubting your past life regression. If you've had a past life regression and you have doubts, you are not alone. And this video is not about convincing you that that was a real past life. I don't know. I wasn't there, and I certainly wasn't there in your past life. But I have been practicing QHHT, past life regression, since 2010. And I've noticed a shift in how it's working for people and where it's taking people and the way that people's trances are working. And I want to share that with you because I think it's a really important thing and it's a really good thing. But we are moving on so many levels from one paradigm to another. And past life regression hypnotherapy is one way that we can see this shift. So here's what's happening. The old paradigm was for me to have a spiritual experience, like a mind blowing, life transforming spiritual experience, I have to kind of go into another realm. And that realm could be through hypnosis, it could be having a vision or whatever, but it's basically very disconnected from me in a way. Here's what I mean. If I have a past life regression under the old model, I go into hypnosis, I basically disappear, and I become the past life. I become my higher self. And I don't have very many memories of what happened afterwards. Now, this can be about the level of hypnosis, the depth of the hypnosis, the depth of trance, but it's also other factors. So it's not only about the depth of trance, but the main idea was that it's like I leave myself behind and some part of my consciousness has this other experience. And so if we imagine that we have like a bandwidth, like a level of a spectrum, the idea is that we have this spectrum, and let's say this is me, and then that spectrum moves, and this is my past life. So, see, I left me behind pretty much, and I moved here. So, what has changed since 2012, and a lot of my fellow QHHT practitioners started noticing this right away. Now, is that people are going into lighter trances. And that was confusing because we thought, well, 2012 is a big shift into awakening. There was the whole Mayan calendar. Many of you maybe are too young to remember all the 2012 frenzy that was going on. It was 12 years ago. So if you're in your mid 20s, you might not really remember that. But we all thought, oh my God, everybody's going to go so deep now. And it was the opposite. And very quickly, I understood the meaning behind that. So here's what changed. Well, subjectively, what changed for people is that they felt that they weren't going into hypnosis as much, or they weren't going as deep. And what was the problem for people? Well, the problem as they were experiencing it was that they felt like they weren't hypnotized because there was an expectation of not remembering and kind of not being there. So here's what shifted. Instead of us going from here, this is my normal self, to here, this is my past life, what happened is we went from here, my normal self, and then stretched it to the past life. So what happened was we didn't get rid of our consciousness in our current life, our current consciousness. We didn't get rid of that to go here. We included both. This is a huge leap for mankind. Okay. To paraphrase Neil Armstrong, um, here's the deal. If I have an experience where I have a dream and I go to heaven and it's amazing, and then I wake up and I barely remember the dream and it all goes away, well, that's scenario one. Here's me, and here's my dream, and when I wake up, my dream goes away. But I want to remember my dream. I want to be more conscious in my dream. So, scenario two, and what's happening now with people's past life regressions, is that here's me, and I have a dream, and I go to heaven, and then when I come back, I remember this part. Okay? What's happening is we're stretching our bandwidth. So, what's the problem? I mean, that's a great thing, right? The problem is that we don't believe it sometimes because we were there. So it feels like, well, I was just saying stuff. I don't know where it came from, you know. So what happens with the client, with the person doing past life regression, is there's this feeling that I'm making it up. Here's the deal with that feeling. Now, I can never say you're not making it up. Okay. We all feel to some degree when we have any kind of experience like that, whether it's past life recall, whether it is an intuition, a psychic premonition, whatever. There's always that part of our mind, our ego, that doubts the experience. And so this is part of the process of awakening and claiming that wider bandwidth. Okay. The old idea that we have to get rid of ourselves in order to move to the other side is false. We don't need to get rid of ourselves. What we want to do is we want to have more bandwidth. But the doubts are amplified because we feel like, you know, when I've been hypnotized many times, there's this part of me, like I'm fully aware of what I'm saying, but there's another part of me is like, where the hell is all this coming from? Um, because I don't normally have access to this other part of my bandwidth. So if you are doubting whether that was a past life, whether that was your higher self coming through, I'm not trying to convince you, but I'm trying to give you a model of how it works. Okay, this is the same model of how it works when you start to develop your intuitive abilities. It's the same exact thing. Okay, you have an intuition, and let's say it's really, really accurate. And the ego part of the mind starts doubting and coming up with other hypotheses and, well, maybe I just made it up. Maybe I just got lucky. Maybe this person told me this thing a long time ago and I forgot. And so now I think it's psychic. Look, I'm all for doubting to some degree, or being skeptical of your own abilities. It's fine. But it's a stage that you need to get past if you want to embody these talents, these abilities. Humanity is ascending. But see, again, our idea of ascending used to be I'm going from here to I'm going here. That's ascending. But no, the feet stay on the ground and the ascension goes up, right? Ascending doesn't mean you're going away. It doesn't mean your body is rising up to heaven. It means that you have access to a wider range of frequencies. It's like, let's say, if we were talking about colors, you would start seeing the infrared and ultraviolet and beyond. You would start seeing the colors that people couldn't see before. That would be ascending, okay? That would be widening the range of perception. So when you experience a past life, but you still are very aware that you are doing hypnosis, that you are lying there on the sofa or whatever, then you're seeing these scenes, and they're not always super clear. So, like, think about if you remember your childhood, what it looks like visually in your mind when you remember your childhood. Okay, it doesn't look like HD TV, surround sound, whatever, necessarily. For some people, maybe it does. Not for me, not for most of my clients. So what is a memory? It's kind of patchy. It's kind of not the full picture, right? But when we remember stuff from our childhood, we're like, yeah, I remember that. Or you remember stuff from last year, whatever. The thing is, when you remember a past life, it's very similar. It can be patchy. It's not a perfect visual. Um, it could be mainly emotional. You could just see little snippets, whatever. Realize it's probably very similar to how you remember things in this life. So, my point is that we are ascending, we are widening our bandwidth. This presents challenges when we have old assumptions about what hypnosis, psychic abilities, spiritual peak experiences, anything like that look like. We need to understand that it's better for our consciousness to remain fully intact while it also ascends to other levels, whether it be a past life or an encounter with a spirit guide or anything like that. So just consider that, yeah, it's normal to doubt these things. It's part of the process. And for a lot of us, we have issues with fear of failure, things like that, where, it freaks us out to feel like we didn't succeed at something. The thing is, when you go into this new bandwidth while retaining the old one, there's going to be some adjustments that have to be made in your consciousness. It's really something that brings up a lot of self-doubt, like when you have a certain premonition, you have a vision, or you see a past life. And that self-doubt is not bad. That self-doubt is actually healthy. But when it's taken to a certain point, it can be a little toxic. And I would recommend trying to not have it. um, but in general, a certain amount of doubt is preferable to me as a hypnotherapist, as a past life regressionist. A certain level of self doubt is kind of preferable to somebody being all in with no doubt whatsoever. Okay, because that is ungrounded. It's good to wonder. On a certain level, you're never going to fully know if you re-experience a past life, you're never going to fully know whether that was real. Like, even if you go and research and find out that life did exist, down to really nitty-gritty details, your ego, your conscious mind, will still partially doubt that that was your past life. You might say, well, maybe I'm psychically tuning in to some dead guy's past life. Maybe some ghost is whispering in my ear. Like, how do I know that was me? And to some degree, you'll never know it was you. I mean, you'll know as an inner feeling, but that skeptical, logical, linear mind of yours might never be satisfied, might never feel like it knows. And that's the tightrope you're going to be walking in your ascension process. So I hope this helps. Please send me any questions that you may have. I would love to follow up on it with future videos. So, yeah. I really hope this gives you a little context if you have done a past life regression in the past, or if you're going to do a past life regression in the future. The main thing that I would say is just don't worry about believing anything. Just let it pass through you, kind of, and notice the emotional reactions. Because the one way that people really have an experience with the past lives where it makes some sense is when they have a really strong emotional reaction to something from that life. And they're like, for example, like, I see this whole village wiped out and I burst into tears and I feel all the grief and all of that. Well, if I'm just making up this scene, why am I having such a strong emotional reaction to the scene that I'm making up? I mean, really? Now, there could be even explanations for that, okay? And the conscious mind is really good at fighting off the higher frequencies sometimes because the ego is territorial. It wants to be the boss of its realm. And so when you start bringing in other lifetimes, you got to understand that wasn't your ego then. That lifetime had a different ego. It wasn't exactly you. So the ego is like, well, what's in it for me? Like this other life is bullshit. I'm me. That's not me, right? So you got to understand the ego fights it. The ego fights everything that doesn't come from ego. So if you communicate with spirit, God, whatever, angels, the ego is like, who the hell's that? I don't believe it. Okay. The ego contains within it your skepticism. So anyway, hope this gives you a little background in case you do past life regression or in case you've already done it. Thanks so much for watching. AndySway.com. Bye-bye.